So thank you for coming today for our talk on the Shem ha-Mephorash. This will be our talk called Kabbalistic Magic of the Shem ha-Mephorash, Part 1. There are a lot of books out there on the Shem, some of them which are very good, but none of them which I feel give a complete picture. I think they're all kind of missing something. They all come from one perspective and maybe don't fully explain where this comes from. So we're going to be talking about the Shem, where it comes from, its biblical and Kabbalistic origins, how it was developed in the Middle Ages, in the Renaissance through various grimoires, the traditions that were passed down, and eventually the innovations of the Hermetic Order, the Golden Dawn, which I really think is the peak of the Shem. And then we're also going to talk about some more simple Martinist practices, specifically in Ambelain's reconstructed Elocohen. Let's just jump right into it. Okay? Move some things over here. So today is us beginning to pivot more towards practice. We've done a lot of theory and history about Martinism in general, about the tradition, about the Gnostic Church. This is more about a very specific Kabbalistic practice that is of high importance in both biblical traditions, Judeo-Kabbalism, as well as in ceremonial magic, occultism, Golden Dawn, Martinism, etc., etc. So it's an interesting topic that expands hundreds of years of development and many different ways of using it. And I think it'll be cool to look at it in a different light. So I'm going to check my mic here again. Someone said I'm loud and clear, but check. All right. That looks good. Cool. I have to edit that whole opening. So types of the name. Shem literally means name, or Shema, the name. Shem ha-Mephorash means the divided name. And we're going to get into that in a moment. There are many types of the name. Any name of deity, any name of God is, by definition, a Shem. When we hear the word Shem, it usually refers to either the general name of deity, perhaps the Old Testament deity Yahweh, or Adonai, or one of those usual names we see in biblical scripture. Or it could refer to very specific forms of the name. There could be 4-lettered, 12-lettered, 22-lettered, 42-lettered version, or even 72-lettered versions of this divine name. Maimonides, way back, he used the Shem specifically to refer to the Tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name Yud, He, Vav, He. Yahweh, Yehovah, Jehovah, Yahweh, however we are pronouncing that. There's also a 12-lettered form in the Talmud. This is unknown in later Kabbalah. We don't see it come back. And it's absent from pretty much all forms of Jewish magic. So it hasn't really been developed, that 12-lettered form. There's also a 22-lettered form that comes from Sepharatziel ha-Malek. That is a highly influential ceremonial magic, Kabbalistic grimoire, essentially. That, by its name, Ratziel ha-Malek, Ratziel the angel, also the king, depending on how you're pointing, Malek or Malak, depending on where the points are. That is said to have been dictated directly by Ratziel, which is, as we know from Kabbalistic lore, the angel that gave the Kabbalah to Adam. There's also a 42-letter name. There's a couple of those, actually. We should describe that. The one given here is that described by Hai Gaon. I'm probably butchering that name. He was a 10th century rabbi. And this is also in Sepharatziel ha-Malek. Lastly, there's the 72-fold name of the Shem ha-Mephorash. And that is the one that most people are talking about when they say when they say the Shem ha-Mephorash. They're referring to the Shem that comes from Exodus 14, 19 to 21. And that's what we're going to spend the majority of tonight talking about. I should also briefly say that we could do a webinar on each one of those names and just talk about just that for a full hour. There's also the Ana ben Kawak, and that's going to lead to the 42 as well in a slightly different way. Maybe we'll talk about that another time. So a 4, a 12, a 22, a 42, and a 72. We're going to focus in on the most famous, the most influential, and that is the 72-lettered Shem, ha-Mephorash. It's also been in some of the older versions, some of the grimoires, the Latin and French documents. It's been written semi-ha-Phoras, Shem-ha-Phoras, various very bad spellings and corrupted Hebrew transliterations. But it really should be Shem, ha-Mephorash, which, here we go, in English. Shem, ha, which is just means the or of, and then Mephorash, divided or undivided name. So some biblical origins. This name comes from the book of Exodus, specifically from 3 verses from Exodus 14, 19 to 21. We're going to talk about where it comes from, how it divides into 72 trigrams, that means 3-lettered names of Yud-He-Vav-He. Remember, Yud-He-Vav-He is a Pentagrammaton, but there's only 3 letters. It's a 3 plus a 1. So it really, that's where Pasquale, I think, got some of his ideas on the idea of 3 plus 1, which he repeats throughout his system, in the grade systems and his number systems, etc., as well as just the general Kabbalistic ideas of the supernal triad and the 1. Tonight's going to go pretty in-depth really quick. If this goes above your head and some of these things are a little, we just go too fast, go back and view Intro to Kabbalah Part 1 and 2. We're considering this to be Intro to Kabbalah Part 3. Go review those, the Tree of Life, your 22 letters, your zodiacal, planetary, and elemental correspondences. That'll help you to understand this part we're going to jump into. We're then going to explore how those 72 trigrams, or 3-lettered names, come into being 72 pentagrammatons, 72 5-lettered names, aka the Shem angels. Then we're going to discuss how those represent the pillars of cloud and the pillar of fire in the book of Exodus. So right into Exodus 14, 19 to 21. This is a special verse that ancient Kabbalists recognized. Each of these 3 verses was contained 72 letters each. And there you see the verses in Hebrew and the verses in English. So let's just read this section, and it gives you some beginning lore on why this became such a powerful part of Jewish magic. And the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. So the pillar of cloud behind, blah, blah, blah. Cloud and fire. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel, and it was a cloud of darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these. So the one came not near the other all the night. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. So these 72 letters in 72 verses 3 times, in 3 verses 3 times, describe the angel of the Lord coming down with the pillars of cloud and fire, leading the Israelites out of Egypt, out of bondage, out of slavery, which, as we talked about in our talk on chivalric orders and masonry, this is a theme that comes up again and again, whether we're talking about the liberation of the Jews from Mitzrayim, from Egypt, or we're talking about the liberation from the Babylonian exile by Zerubbabel, bringing them back to the Holy Land with the blessing of King Cyrus, or we're talking about the destruction of the Second Temple and the hopeful building of the Third Temple, that spiritual temple. This is a theme, or even Adam and Eve with the exile from the Garden of Eden. This is a theme that comes up again and again in mysticism. This idea of returning, this idea of escaping from bondage and coming back into spirituality, or from the bondage of the flesh, Malkut, upwards into Yesod and Tiferet. Which is definitely one way to interpret these verses. So it has this theme of the angels, it has these themes of the pillar of cloud and fire and water, or a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire, which are pillars of mercy and severity. And it has this parting of the Red Sea, bringing them out of the bondage up the path of Tav towards Yesod, and then up the path of Samek towards Tiferet. You can jump into Halevi's book Kabbalah and Exodus for a lot more on that. But this Shem ha-Mephorash that is derived from these verses is known as the name of brilliant fire. It is also known as the divided name, or the 72 leaves of the tree of life. Also simply, as the Golden Dawn calls it, the healing leaves of the tree of life. The name originates from these 216 letters, derived from these 3 verses. And what they do, one of the first texts that explains how the name is formed is the Bahir. Specifically, paragraph 110. Quote, there is a name that is derived from 3 verses, Exodus 14, 19 to 21. The letters of the first verse are arranged in the order they are in the verse. So remember, Hebrew's right to left. I don't know if I'm doing this right in the camera or if it flips or not, but I'm going to do my perspective. So right to left. So you write verse 19, right to left. Left, right in the video. There we go. Verse 19 this way. And then you drop down verse 20 this way. 19, 20, drop down again. Verse 21 that way. Whatever, you get the idea. One way, the other way, the other way. And then you have these 72 columns that come up now. This is explained first in the Bahir. And they say that these are the 72 names. They emanate and divide themselves into 3 sections, 24 to each section. You'll also see 4-lettered sections. There's all different kinds of ways these get divided throughout the evolution of Kabbalah now. But right away, the Bahir gives you a 3-section division. Each section has 4 directions to watch: the east, the west, the north, and the south. These 4 directions have a total of 24 forms. This is true of the first section as well as the second and third. All of them are sealed with Yud He Vav He, the God of Israel, the living God, Shaddai, high and exalted, who dwells in eternity on high, whose name is holy, Yahweh. Blessed be the name of the glory of his kingdom forever and ever. Let's see what that looks like rather than just talking about it. So there's those verses. We've broken it up so it wouldn't be just this long 72, so we can actually see it. And it's divided here into 4 sections attributed to Yud, my mouse, Yud, He, Vav, and He. Here's verse 1, going all the way across. That'd be 72 across, straight across in a line. Then we drop down 1. We go the other direction. So from here, we go all the way across. I know it looks like we're going up, but we're really just going backwards. We're going left to right here. Okay? Verse 21, we drop down again. We go all the way across. And now we have 72 columns. Okay? These 72 columns become the 72 Shem, trigrams, 3-lettered names, which are 72 names of God. They are further divided here into sets of 4, 18, 36, 54, 72. And those are thence attributed to the 4 letters of the divine name, Yud, He, Vav, and He. There are infinite things we could do with that, just analyzing that section. You could attribute that perhaps to the 4 worlds, to the 4 elements. There's a myriad of things we could do with that. But here we have those 72 trigrams now, these 3-lettered holy names of divinity. Like I said, these are highly important Sepharatio. This is a key component to the magical practices in the Lesser Key of Solomon, but it's missing in some versions of it. This format of writing one direction, next direction, next direction in columns or in rows is called bustaphedron, or writing bustaphedronically. What a crazy word, right? So, written in bustaphedron. This method was explained in the Bahir and by Rashi, a medieval French rabbi who was also known as Shlomo Yitzchaki. Probably butchered that name. Did my best. Kabbalistic and occult legends state that the 72-fold name was used by Moses to cross the Red Sea, just as we saw in verses 19 to 21. And that it can grant later holy men, us, the power to cast out demons, to heal the sick, to prevent natural disasters, and even to kill enemies. The 72-fold name is mentioned by Roger Bacon, who complained about a book titled Liber, ha-Mephorash, more specifically the linguistic corruption that occurred in translating Hebrew to Latin. These angels of the Shem are factor heavily into the cosmology of Johann Reuchlin. They influence Henry Cornelius Agrippa, Athanasius Kircher, which we'll talk about in depth in a moment. Thomas Rudd also featured them in his magic, and he used them as a balancing force against the 72 dark or evil spirits of the Ars Goetia. And we'll get into that in a moment again. Rudd's material on the Shem was probably sourced by Blaise de Vigenère. Some people say that it was the other way around, but Blaise was before Rudd. Anyways, whose manuscripts were later used by S.L. McGregor Mathers in the Golden Dawn, who greatly expanded the system. And then they were also used by Robert Ambelain in his reconstructed Elocohen. I probably should have been showing you this slide. So these are basically some of the things we're going to go over. We're going to go in depth into how Agrippa presented it in his 3 books of occult philosophy. Liber Juratus, or the Sworn Book of Honorius. Blaise de Vigenère. Athanasius Kircher's Oedipus Egyptiacus. The 6 and 7 books of Moses. Mather's Golden Dawn. And Ambelain's reconstructed Helen. So, these are the names as presented in Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy, minus, there's a lot of formatting issues that happen, so these aren't going to look all perfect when you're dropping from doc into PowerPoint. The column on the left specifically is what he utilized, okay? And I'm just showing you some of the other attributes that were created later. So, Agrippa brings together all these names and starts to list them out, right? The first book of occult philosophy by Agrippa, to give you some time frame and reference, was printed in 1531 in Paris, Cologne, and Antwerp. And all 3 volumes first appeared together in Cologne in 1533. So this is some pretty old stuff. Agrippa, in a similar manner to Rabbi Abulafia, explains this concept of taking the 72 trigrams which we had and how he made them into these 72 pentagrammatons. I have a good version of that for you. So there's your trigrams. And essentially what you do with each of these names, you add a suffix, an ending of Ya or El. So Yud He or Aleph Lamed. And those in turn represent the pillars of mercy and severity. Okay, so for each one of those, you'll see that every angel has an ending of Ya or El, and that is a pretty much general universal ending for angels that you'll see. So for here, Vav, He, Vav became Vahuya, Vahuya. Yud, Lamed, Yud became Yelial, or Jelial if you're if you're reading it like that, but Yelial, by adding the suffix of El, and so on and so forth. That continues on. Agrippa says in his text, quote, "My angel shall go before thee, observe him, for my name is in him. And these are those that are set over the 72 celestial quinaries." This is a key later. "And so many nations and tongues and joints of man's body, and cooperate with the 72 seniors of the synagogue, and so many disciples of Christ." So he's linking it to Christian Kabbalah already, right? "And their names, according to the extraction which the Kabbalists make, are manifest in this following table, which you see." He did not include these ruling angels, that is Ambelain, or this order of archangels, order of angels, that is also Ambelain. The demons per Rudd, we've shown those to show how they can pair up together. Kind of jumping ahead here. There's so much to cover. By pairing these with the Goetic Ars Goetia spirits, you have this beneficent Shem ha-Mephorash spirit and this malefic Goetic spirit. And you use the one to control the other. You see this come up in Carol Polk Runyon's Ordo Templi Astarte. He actually has a fantastic representation of how to do that. One of the more unique ones. So Agrippa in turn got this from Francisco Giorgi, his text De Harmonia Mundi, which was from 1525, and that is the oldest version I've seen of that specific quote to introduce the Shem ha-Mephorash. So Agrippa gives 5-lettered Pentagrammaton names, right? These are the 72 names of God, the trigrams, made into 72 angels of God, the Pentagrammatons, with the suffix Ya or El. Ya signifies the pillar of mercy and beneficence. Is that correct? Yes, and El signifies the pillar of severity and judgment. I know that sounds a little confusing to modern, like, Golden Dawn Kabbalists, because the idea that El is mercy, but that's the attribution that was used back then. You could also see Ya being as the pillar of mercy, the root of Hakma, and then El being like the next development from that, right? The 72 names are seen as expressions of Yod-He-Vav-He. So just as we have those permutations of Yod-He-Vav-He, which are permutated as the banners of the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 names of that, Yod-He-Vav-He, He-Vav-He Yod, Vav-He Yod-He, etc., etc. Those are like ways you can invoke the 12 tribes, the 12 zodiacal signs. These are also seen as being permutations of that one holy name. And they are further separated into choirs of angels, as well as 4 divisions of 18 letters according to Tetragrammaton. That's that first table we saw, where the first 18 were Yud, the second 18 were He, the third 18 were Vav, the last 18 were He, final. Stick with me. Let's see how Liber Juratus, then, which is one of the oldest and most influential texts of medieval magic, of classical ceremonial magic, also includes these names. But whereas Agrippa had a more complex presentation of them, Juratus just gives you all of them straight in a block together. You just invoke all of them by saying one after another. Behuya, Ieuya, Aniel, Mebahia, Leliel, Fahaliel, and they're definitely not standardized spellings. I mean, the Hebrew transliterations are pretty lacking back then, we could say. I think things have gotten a lot better now. So maybe they made a slip back with Ambelain. Anyways, that's the version that was presented in that text. The prologue of the text says it was compiled to help preserve the core teachings of sacred magic in the face of intense persecution by church officials. If this book is as old as some claim it is, then this may be a reference to the actions of Pope John the 22nd, 1316 to 1334 was when he was pope. One commentator says that Liber Juratus is obviously linked to the inspiration of the grimoire of Pope Honorius, which is something that Levy and Waite say is a forgery, whereas Liber Juratus is the real thing. It also includes an explanation taken verbatim, the same explanation we just read from Agrippa, which is copied by from De Harmonia Mundi. He includes that same introduction and then gives us this complete 72-fold. I should learn to do this and point up at the... Yeah, cool. Learning. The next major development, so we now have with Agrippa and with Liber Juratus, we have the Trigrammaton names, let's say Vav He Vav, developed into Vahuya. There are a number of texts out there about working with just those 3-lettered Trigrammatons. You've got modern Kabbalists like the Bergs from the Kabbalah Center that has a fantastic, almost like coffee table style book. But there's some really nice meditations in there. And you can just meditate in just those letters. If you're good with your basic Hebrew understanding what the letters represent, if you work with your root letters and you pull out your Kabbalistic dictionary, perhaps pull out Strong's Concordance and see how those roots are used in the Bible. You can do all kind of meditations just on those trigrammatons. You can do those traditional meditations, right? Or you can take it a step further, turning into these angels and use them for angelic magic. And the next major development we have after Agrippa and after Juratus is Blaise de Vigenère. He supposedly lived from April 5th, 1523 to February 19th, 1596. He was a French diplomat, cryptographer, translator, and alchemist. Here we see the oldest version of the seals, the actual glyphs, sigils, or seals of the Shem ha-Mephorash, the ones that have become so famous nowadays. These right here are scans of the Arsenal 2495 manuscript, and this is attributed to Blaise. Interestingly, these seals kind of disappear from Kabbalah for quite some time. And then they really make a return in Linnaean's Le Science Kabbalistique, or at least the explanations do, in 1823. And then they were fully revived by the Golden Dawn by Mathers and his paper on the Shem ha-Mephorash. And they were also fully revived in a much more simple way in Robert Ambelain's works, specifically La Kabbale Pratique. So here we start to see a major development with Shem ha-Mephorash. Okay, now we've got explanations on each angel. They're not just names, they're not just letters. They're developed into entities with their own archetypes, their own powers and modes of being. They have verses from the Psalms attributed to them. Here we can see 90 verses 9. It's all written in Latin, obviously. You see the sigil. You also, I think this is when you start to have days, certain days attributed. Like this angel here, 22nd of August is one of the days attributed to it. And we're going to come to see that those days become very arbitrary very quickly. And there's a lot of different ways to attribute them. Use them if they work for you. And if you're going to use it, stick with one system, I suggest. Okay? We'll get back to that in a moment. But as an example, we see here in the center, you see the sigil here? Here is a modern rendition of how I've further developed the system and just made it more complex. And we'll come to explain what this means in a moment. But this is essentially me utilizing the Kabbalistic Tree of Life in 4 worlds and using, you can see just by looking at the colors used exactly which sphere of the Tree of Life this is attributed to. But we'll return to that later. Your next major development is Athanasius Kircher's Oedipus Egyptiacus. This is, when you look at Wikipedia, it says it's his crown jewel of Egyptology. So why is there all this Kabbalah in there, right? But there's a big section on Kabbalah as well. That image on the left is probably the most famous image of the Shem ha-Mephorash, drawn out both as letters in a circle. Well, let's start from the beginning. Okay, we've got all letters going around, alphabet, divine name in the center, Yeshua, in hoc signo, and then we start to have right here we see the number 1. That's going to be your first name, right? And they're going to go all the way around 72. You've got also all these numbers coming out, the Hebrew numbers, attributions of them. Number 1, Vahu, Vav, He, Vav, right? Vahuya. Number 2, Yud, Lamed, Yud, right? Yeliel. Remember we saw that was the second one, etc., etc. So here he really takes that image of the healing leaves of the Tree of Life, and he literally has a tree with the names of the leaves growing off of them. And these could then represent truly the Tree of Life, which Adam never ate of, right? Because he was expelled from the Garden of Eden. The path of flame and sword was left to keep the way. So there's a lot of really interesting symbolism to come up. You'll see here in the bottom right, he's got an image of another tree with the 12 tribes of Israel and their Hebrew names as well, and there looks like the permutations of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the 12 banners. So you see that he's starting to show a correspondence with that with the zodiacal signs. Right down here we see another tree with 7 specific names. There's 7 archangels that rule over the planets. So we've got the planetary and the zodiacal. Okay, we see this fully coalesce and come together in the Golden Dawn, but we'll get to there in a moment. In the center, this is one of the openings of this lecture. Nomen Dei 72, Literarum in nomine Dei Tetragrammato something exhibitum. So the exhibit of the 72-fold name of God, the Tetragrammaton. We see this diagram exactly pulled in Mather's paper in the Shem ha-Mephorash. This book, well, specifically Kircher's texts in general, are one of the most important texts to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn system. Almost every one of the grade diagrams comes directly from this text. Almost all the Kabbalistic diagrams you see come right from it. Olin Rush has done a great job working on some of those in his Rosenroth project. Rosenroth as well, that's what I'm thinking of. But Rosenroth and Kircher are two of the most important source texts for the Golden Dawn. So here, Kircher's now taking the 72-fold name, there we go, Vahuv, right? Vahuya, and he gives it another describing name, Deus Exaltator, God exalted, right? Or the exalter of God. Spes, hope. Saluator, salvation or saluting. So he gives another title to this, which gives us more to work with beyond just the most basic way of working with this, which is just knowing your letters and meditating on them mystically and letting it come to you. To now you have a 5-letter name to work with. You've got these pillars to symbolize. You're starting to have extra names. You're starting to have also these psalms specifically attributed and codified. So he starts to codify 71 psalms to the 72 Shem. They're all psalms except for one of them. The 70th Shem is attributed to a verse from Genesis. This verse from Judeo does not contain the four letters of God, but it does contain the trigram of the 70th name. So he did something really clever. Whoever first created that, this is one of the first origins of it being this clean. He gives it not just as a Latin or a French, he gives you the Latin and the Hebrew from it, right? So he's going Masoretic as well as Vulgate. So this is a huge development. This text was, just to give historical context in the time, it was a three full folios of ornate illustrations published in Rome over the period of 1652 to 1654. So we're almost 100 years later now, right? Kircher cited his sources as his sources Chaldean astrology, Hebrew Kabbalah, obviously, Greek mythology, Pythagorean mathematics, Arabian alchemy, and Latin philosophy. He also begins giving astrological decadent correspondences. And again, like I said, these astrological correspondences are going to be very fluid depending on what time in history we're talking about. What he does is the very first name, so Vahuya, is cardinal fire. So it's Aries, right? So the first one is Aries, and then you've got the quinances or decadent. You got the decadences, right? First, second, third, you're done with Aries, right? Then, I guess that means the fourth name, I'm going off the top of my head, so some of this might not be exact. But I believe the fourth name, it's now going to flip to fixed fire. So, Leo, you're going to go through those names, then you're going to pop into cardinal, mutable fire. So it goes cardinal, fixed, mutable, fire, and then he goes to He, water, cardinal, fixed, mutable. Vav, cardinal, fixed, mutable. He, cardinal, fixed, mutable. So he follows very much that, kind of like that structure we saw in our first breakdown, right? Where we had the first 18 names being Yud, 666, 6 names as Aries, 6 names as Leo, 6 names as Sagittarius. So they're the decanates. Anyways, we're going to see how that gets developed and changed into something different, and how the Golden Dawn turns that entire thing on its head. I would say that most systems probably use something like that, where Vahuya, the first name, is Aries. It is spring equinox. I believe Ambelain does the same thing, but I think he begins it as a clock now, rather than cardinal, fixed, mutable. I could be wrong, though. We'll talk about the Golden Dawns in a second. So the next major development is the 6th and 7th books of Moses. And you have this beautiful diagram there on the left. I get used to doing that. Das Shem ha-Mephorash. And some German I can't read. We look at this. Let's see if we can find where the Huya is. Yalel. Oh, it's in there somewhere. Anyway, so here we have a very different diagram. And then this also brings up a completely different 72-fold name, Shem ha-Mephorash, and it calls it the same thing. So there is some conflation occurring now. We see here, number 1, Isakure, Yehovah, Messias, Tav, Yah, Heva, Elohim, Zidkenu, etc., etc., etc. You have 36 here. Symbol lodge perfection. You have 36 here, making 72. And he links this to the Tetractus and the divine name manifesting through 4 worlds. Yud, Yud, He, Yud, He, Vav, Yud, He, Vav, He. Even if those letters are kind of bad. Very common in this time period. For the 6th and 7th books of Moses, obviously they're not actually written by Moses. They're attributed thereto. No first version of this work has ever been established, so it's hard to tell how old it is. But we do know that inexpensive pamphlet versions of it were circulating in Germany in the 18th century. Elements of the 7th book, such as the 7 semiphoros of Adam, so the 7-letter name of Adam, the 7 semiphoros of Moses, or Shem, appear to have come from the Sefer Ratziel HaMalach, which we talked about earlier. This was republished in 1849 in Stuttgart. Now, what's interesting is that in this text, when you get to the actual Shem section, it references something stating that it was published in 1686 by a Jesuit named P. Hoffman. From the Arcane Bible of Moses. It's very common for things to be attributed and backdated, but the text itself tries to reference itself as being as old as 1686. What's interesting about this text is it also includes Sefer Shemush Tehillim, or the use of the Psalms. This latter text is later translated. Was translated from the Hebrew into German by Gottfried Selig, who lived from 1722 to 1795. And he was a publisher of a German periodical Jude about Jewish customs and practices. So now we have this Shem, a very different Shem, but also the classical Shem, united with the use of the Psalms. As we know, we already have the Psalms being expressed in Kircher's text. But now is where we're starting to get into like the explanation of Psalm 119, for example, and the explanation of how you use each psalm to do different magical practices. Okay? Let's go kick into like overdrive here and talk about how the Golden Dawn innovated all those things. They took the history of all those things that have been done before, and like the Golden Dawn tend to do, it unified the entire system into like this beautiful crown. They took those 72 and they attributed it to the 72 decanates of the zodiac, but they specifically made the first Shem, the Huya, to begin with Leo, 0 degrees Leo. And that means it starts with star Regulus or Cor Leonis, the heart of the lion, the star of the prince. And this is highly significant that they moved it from Aries to Cor Leonis, to the heart of the lion. Pretty obvious what we're doing here at that point. If you're familiar with any systems that talk about the lion. That became its starting point. Thus, it's positioned more according to sidereal astrology, right? Precession of the equinoxes. And also putting the Christ as the heart, right? Putting that as the starting point of everything. So what they do now is they make a very logical system at that point. Okay? Number 1, almost duped myself there. Number 1, number 2, number 3, right? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, actually, back up. These are decanates. Decanates are 10 degrees, right? So we're looking at a circle. You can also graft upon this the zodiacal wheel. Okay, I should have pulled that diagram up. You know what? I'm going to do that anyways, real quick. So that we can have a visual aid on that. It's not going to match up perfectly. But it'll be good enough. Voila. Rotate it so that it matches up the same way. Perfect. Cool. So this just helps to show that the diagram on the left is a zodiacal wheel, right? This is a standard zodiacal wheel: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, etc., etc. Okay. This wheel is then divided into 3 decanates, 3 divisions. So a wheel is 360 degrees, right? Divide it into 12. That's 12 sections of 30 degrees. Divide that into decanates, 10 decan. You have these 3 10-degree sections. Okay, those are symbolized also here by God, He, and Yud He Vav He. They're also symbolized in the diagram as these 1, 2, and 3 aspects of the triangle, right? What the Golden Dawn did that was frigging brilliant is not only did they attribute these decanates to them, to the Shem ha-Mephorash, they also split it between the quinances, right? And I guess that wasn't new, but so by quinance, it means you have a day and a night angel. So quinance is a 5-degree system. So the first 5 days, we're just going to use Aries because it's easier. It's on the left. The first 5 days of Aries, no, we're going to use Leo. The first 5 days of Leo is the first angel, Shem. Days 6 through 10 are the second angel of the Shem. Days 11 through 15 are the third, 16 to 20 are the fourth, 21 to 25 are the fifth, 25 to 26 to 30th are the sixth. Or those entire first 10 days, the day that first angel rules, the night the second angel rules. The second 10 days, the third angel rules during the day, the fourth angel rules during the night. The third 10 days, the fifth angel rules during the day, the sixth angel rules at night. Brilliant system, and even further than that, they attributed to it one of the minor arcana of the tarot. So now, whereas this tradition began with just 3 letters, Vav, He, Vav, and meditating on that, contemplating those letters, working them through your mind in permutations and meditations and vibrations. Then you had a psalm attributed to it. Then you had an extra name. Then you had an angel attribute to it. Then you had etc., etc. Now you have as a zodiacal force, and by attributing it to it zodiacals, you also have a planetary force. Each decanate is ruled by a planet, and this goes down the tree of life. It's a very, very simple formula: Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sol, Venus, Mercury, Luna. It starts over. But simply, it's going down the tree of life: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sol, Venus, Mercury, Luna. Start it over again. You'll see that pattern go all the way through. That's your key to how the minor arcana flow, okay, and how they flow through the zodiac. This becomes highly important later when you work the Enochian system of the Golden Dawn. So now in the Golden Dawn, you have all those things from beforehand, but you can also analyze this angel as a zodiacal force and as a planet within that zodiac. You can also analyze it as just a million other things, right? So you've got an Atu attribute to it. You've got all these things attribute to them, right? So it gives you a lot more to work with. And it literally creates an astrological clock. So whereas we were talking before, most of the systems started with Vahuya, angel number 1, as being Aries, spring equinox. Now we're going to the heart of the lion. We align everything to Christ, right? To the lion. And you have this clock. So before we get there, that was further expanded, made more complicated, because it would attribute to the tree of life in 4 worlds. So here we see Yud, He, Vav, He, just like we had before, right? But now these are going to permutate through the decanates, which each of those attributes to one of these spheres. Hold that thought. We'll get back to that in a second. Okay? Let me see. Is there anything else I wanted to talk about it? This, I should give credit. This diagram on the left comes from Tarot Talismans by Chick and Sandra Tabitha Cicero. It's a quite brilliant book, and they use the tarot minors together with the 72 Shem as a way to like visualize and have something to work with those Shem angels in your invocations and prayers. And this diagram here comes from Kabbalistic Tarot by Robert Wang, my personal favorite beginner text to give anyone on ha-Kabbalah, especially Hermetic Kabbalah. These tables come from Chick and Tabby's book as well. And here they've brought together a lot of things. You have the Trigram, Vahuv, the angel, Vahuvia, the title derived from the psalm, as we saw in Kircher, God the Exaltor. Remember, it was Deus Exaltator. The sign is Leo. The decan is Saturn. So Saturn in Leo. Angel by day of the letter Yud. And then continues to add in another element, the angelic choir. Right? You also see Ambelain do this. He starts to add in these choirs. I'm not sure if these are the same. I think they are, though. But starts to add in... no, they are different. But he starts to add in angelic choirs to it. Adds in the tarot card like we talked about, and then you have the key word of that tarot card, strife. So you've got all these ways to visualize that and to start working with these angels and spirits. This here is from an unpublished paper of the Inner Order of the Golden Dawn, RRDC, by greatly honored Frater Seb Spey. It was for the 5=6 Zam grade, Zelator Adeptus Minor. And here is when they really reveal the keys to the tree of life in 4 worlds and how you use the tarot minors to on the tree of life in 4 worlds. So this gives you even more to work with, right? Now you've got a Sephirotic thing to contemplate. So this helps you starting into multidimensional consciousness. This starts to work on how to rise in the planes, how to visualize and make the tree of life in 4 worlds mean something, right? And that's where all these colors come in and how I utilized it. We'll get into that in a second. Drinking from a fire hose yet? So let's move forward to the next section. So, all right, that was a bunch of stuff. What does this all mean? Why do we use it? Let's start with the most complex now, and then we're going to return to the most simple. So we started with the most simple, 3 letters, adding all these correspondences to it, making it bigger and bigger and bigger. Now we're going to talk about why you would use all that, where would you do that, and then get more simple, okay? So, magical intentions of the Shem. Utilizing what we just did, this complex system, you can use Shem meditations or invocations to gain insight into a minor arcana, to gain insight into, why is the 5 of Wands strife? Why is it Lord of Strife? And you contemplate, well, it's Saturn in Leo. So Leo has this, it's the self. It is solar. It's perhaps like a ruach or ego aspect. It's also kingship, but it's Saturn operating within Leo. So this restriction, this difficulty, death, decay, also foundations, right? And you start to contemplate that with the name Deus Exaltator and the psalm itself, and perhaps something will click in there, right? You get all these correspondences together, and you can get an insight into a minor arcana card. You can also use it to gain understanding of the tree of life in 4 worlds. And that helps you understand the tree of life in 1 world when you see how it operates in 4. When you see what does... so in the case of Vahuya, it is the 5 of Wands, which means it is Gebura in Absolute, right? If you're looking at the 6 of Cups, you're looking at Tiferet in Bria, Hey. If you're looking at the 3 of swords. You're looking at Binah, the third Sephiroth, in the third world Vav, Yetzirah. If you're looking at then the 10 of discs, the 10 of pentacles, you're looking at Malkut in Asiya. So it really makes the tree life in 4 worlds come to life. And that's where I utilized, and that's specifically why I created these paintings of the tree of life in 4 worlds. I'll blow this up for a second. Oh, you guys can't see you can't see me, can you? Oh well, it'll be in the recording. Let's give you a visual aid instead then. That's one thing I haven't totally figured out with OBS. Can you all see me? Let me know in the text. Can you see my picture or not? Oh no, we're getting some internet connectivity issues, aren't we? Oh, bummer. Can't see me. Okay. Looks like there's some internet connectivity issues though. I'm even seeing that. Stream health. All right, well, I'm just gonna keep going. If the stream's cutting out, I'm sorry. There will be a video later. Okay, cool. Sorry, I saw someone saying that. So here we've got the tree of life, and let's start most simple. The version we're all familiar with is actually these two combined together. It's the Sephiroth of Bria and the paths of Absolute. Okay, we talked about this a little bit in Kabbalah Part 1, I think, maybe Part 2. So the king scale, the queen scale, right? You can use these colors as ways to pop up to those Sephiroth. You literally stack these one on top of each other as Jacob's ladder. Let me pull you up a diagram. Here we go. This is going to look crazy. This is the tree of life in 4 worlds. Okay? Yud, absolute nearness. Hey, creation. Bria. Vav, Yetzirah, the astral, the formative world. And final Hey, Asiya, action, the material plane. You see this pure white begins to get more and more dense as it goes down. Okay? Give you another representation of that. Absolute. Asiya. Another version of Asiya. Another version of Absolute. Another version of Absolute. Bria. Etc. Anyways. You can use these as ways to create some really magical things. So, one of the ways that I did this is I took those classical seals of the Shem ha-Mephorash, and I created a system in which, using the tarot card, using the planetary and zodiacal card, you would create a specific color sequence that just by looking at it, if you know your tree life in 4 worlds, you can name exactly what that Sephiroth is. Okay? Exactly what we're dealing with. So this one here, for example, show it to you for a second. We can tell by looking at it. Funny, this is back when I was following Ambelain's instructions to write Hebrew clockwise. I wouldn't do that anymore. Lamed, Kaf, Bayet, Aleph, Lamed. So, Lakabel, something like that, right? And by the colors, The ground force would be the color of the zodiacal sign. This is a very dark purple, so this was meant to be Capricorn. The next color was meant to be the planetary sign. Okay, so we can tell by the purple there, by the violet, that this is Jupiter. So it's Jupiter in Capricorn, which we can tell by the color of the sigil itself and the name itself, which this is white flecked with red, yellow, and blue, Aleph, Mem, and Shin. We can tell that we are dealing with specifically, pull up the tree for you. We're dealing with right here. So that is Hakma in Asiya, the two of discs, right? Just give you an example of some of the other ones. So this is Asiya, you can tell because the flecks, right? The pink flecks on a gray background. That means we're dealing with the three of discs. Hey, pulled out one after another. It's still Capricorn, right? But now it's Mars. Remember we were talking about how the tree of life goes down? So we had Jupiter, now Mars. The next one will be Sol. Take this one here. This is a, make sure I orient it right. This one is blue as a background. So it's either going to be, it's probably Sagittarius, right? Yellow, that could be either Sol or Mercury, depending on if you're using planetary. It probably is supposed to be Sol. Can't really tell off the top of my head right now, though. Etc., etc. So you have these different color combinations. And sometimes the color combinations come together in a way that makes a lot of sense. Like this one right here, the red on red, that's Aries as a background. That's Mars. So Mars in Aries, which is the two of Wands, Dominion, Lord of Dominion. I mean, what's more Dominion than Mars and Aries, right? And what's brilliant about the Golden Dawn is that these aren't just arbitrary. You could say they're arbitrary, but the magic when you're doing these things and all of a sudden something really crazy comes out and they just match up perfectly. Here's a great example of a day angel and a night angel. I'm not sure which one's which. Same color, same forces. One rules the day, one rules the night. The way that Ambelain would use his, which we'll get to in a moment, he would use the same thing, but it was much more simple, right? He didn't have all these crazy colors. This is more traditional sigil work. Virgin parchment, red pen, red ink, you know? And on the back here, I was writing the psalm and the attributes and all other stuff. So lots of ways you can do these. You can make them small, make them really big. We did a lot of this when I was running, we started doing this, I think, in 2011, 2010, in a Golden Dawn temple, the awesome Golden Dawn temple, and we did all 72. Every 5 days, we would follow that clock. We do a new one every 5 days. It becomes a grueling operation to stick with making a talisman and working it every 5 days. Since then, a couple of different people have taken that mantle up, some more successfully than others. Once Soror just finished doing it, good work to you. So with all that we just said, you can use that to understand the operation of a planet within a zodiacal sign. How does Mars act in Aries, right? With all these diversity of methods, you can use it to understand the 7 lights operating through the zodiac. That's the planets in the zodiac. You can use it to align your microcosm to the macrocosm, right? To align yourself to the universal macrocosmic clock. And this would be the sun as it enters each decadent, or really each quinance, as the sun traverses its kingdom. This kind of work can give you incredible insights to the patterns of the macrocosm and the reactions that it elicits in your own microcosm. Some of these Shem might not seem pleasant. You're like, that's a really bad card, like the 9 of Swords, the 10 of Swords. But by doing this regularly, you come to transcend some of those attractions and aversions. You can also use this for base magic, lower magic to manifest one's will. Um, each of these Shem can have a specific magical intention associated with it, or specific thaumaturgic use, such as, I think it is the Three of Cups. Be wrong though, could be the Two of Cups. It says specifically this angel is good for finding stolen things and bringing them back to you, and revealing the person that stole them. So I think this is 2012 or so. I had a laptop stolen from my front patio. In their defense, I left it out. But it was stolen from a patio, and once I realized it, I got up, I pulled that Shem talisman, which is already consecrated, threw it down, and called it forth, asked for the person that stole my computer to reveal themselves and for it to return. And before I was even done doing the prayer, knock, knock, knock on the front door. And the next door neighbor, she presents her son, her teenage son, with the laptop in hand. Of course, I didn't come down on him. I was friends with him and stuff. And it was a lesson for him to not do stuff like that. But some really amazing magic can manifest. These spirits really do manifest quickly and powerfully here sublunary. As always, with having so many different ways to work something, try different things out. The way that I suggest this when my Golden Dawn students will go into this is I suggest we'll give them 5 different ways to work it. Try 5 different ways. Try different ways of invoking it. Do a Golden Dawn aspect. Do like a more mystical Christian aspect of it. Do a purely Judaic way of doing it. Try the Martinist techniques out. See what works for you. See what makes things different, or if there is a difference. But I would say if you're going to do a regular operation of all 72 Shem, pick one correspondence set and do that all the way through. Otherwise, you're going to confuse yourself. If you start using the French system instead of the English system, or this or that, then things get strange. Someone asked what these were. These are Hobby Lobby. They're little 6-inch lamens. They work great as temple lamens too. So another reason to do a practice like this with regularity is just to use as drill practices. As Crowley says, any practice that you do regularly is important and can do these things. So with this, you can have the fortification of the body of light by constant use of rituals, by assumption of God forms, and here you can take on the angels through talismanic images, and by right use of the Eucharist. 2, the purification and consecration and exaltation of that body by the use of rituals and invocation. It's pretty straightforward. Number 3, the education of that body by experience. It must learn to travel on every plane, to break down every obstacle which may confront it. This experience must be as systematic and regular as possible. There's nothing more systematic or regular than doing a 72-fold practice for a year, in which every 5 days you have to completely change your perspective into a different force. Now, what we're showing here is highly advanced ritual work, and we're going to show you a simpler thing in a moment. But he says, it is of no use to merely travel to the spheres of Jupiter and Venus, the nice ones, or even to explore the 30 aethers, neglecting the unattractive meridians. So even though some cards or some forces might seem more malefic, it is important when you're working these higher systems of magic to allow yourself to dive into them and get to the root of what they are, to not be afraid of them, and to incorporate them as well. One more thing on the Golden Dawn aspect of since we've thrown all that through there, there's so many ways you can analyze these forces now. Again, through the Hebrew name and root, using strong concordance perhaps, through gematria and tumora, moving the letters around, looking up the numbers, through talismanic images of the name, so using Vahuvia again, Vav, He, Vav, Yud, He, going down, and then crossing the other direction, Vav, He, Yud, they're going to unite. One Yud, Vav, He, Vav, one Vav, Yud, He. It's a cross, Vahuvia. That's a talismanic image from which you can develop an image, right? So its head would be a Vav. Its head would have the color, the head would look like a bull, right? Taurus, the Hierophant. The shoulders would be strong like the emperor, the body of a bull. I guess I'm describing my tarot card. Talismanic image, etc., etc. You use those with different colors, different coordinations, and there are entire lectures on that in the Golden Dawn. Analyze it through astrological correspondences, through the tarot minors, the Sephira and the Four Worlds, through Agrippa's magical image of the decans. Those give you specific images for each 10 decans, each 72 decans. Also through the mystical attributes of the Psalms, both the ones given by Kircher and other interpretations of the Psalms, and through the magical attributions of the day and night angels, i.e. their thaumaturgic uses. So you see that by doing a system like this, you use all 4 types of Kabbalah. We're dipping into dogmatic Kabbalah, i.e. the Bahir, Sephiratziel, the Kabbalah of the Sephirot Zira, and the meanings of the letters. We're tapping into practical Kabbalah, i.e. ceremonial magic, talismans, creating visions. We're tapping into literal Kabbalah of Gematria, of Temura, maybe of some Notarikon. And we're tapping into the unwritten Kabbalah, this oral tradition, which we're giving you right here, right? Creating new ways of using this, finding new creative ways to make these things relevant again and make them have meaning for you. So that's all the highly complex aspect of the 72. Let's scale it down now. Ambelain, in his La Kabbale Pratique, he essentially repackaged Lenain's work, complete with the seals from Arsenal 2495. He offers a systematic, classical ceremonial magic way of working the angels in a structured way. And again, he uses the French days of ruling. So it's going to have completely different attributions than the Golden Dawn. It's okay. So, for example, he opens. He might have an altar set up. He likes using red altars, so he'll have a red altar. I can have a picture of this actually. Here we go. He'll have a red altar set up, a candle, salt, and water. And give me just a moment to pull up my source text here. I thought I had it, but I had one of my amalgamations. There you go. So I took his ritual and expanded a little bit, and he suggests essentially you start off with Eliphas Levi's Grand Invocation of Solomon from Ritual de la Haute Magie, chapter 13, I believe it is. And this is essentially a invocation of the Tree of Life within the sphere of sensation. He calls forth all the spirits of the Tree of Life, and as you do those names, you should visualize those spheres lighting up around within you. Or do the Tree of Life in a sphere, see it all around you in your sphere of sensation, right? Pretty practical, pretty simple. It's kind of like doing the Kabbalistic cross beforehand, but a little more juicy. Then he creates an opening of the Shem prayer, which he sources directly from Lenain's La Science Kabbalistique of 1851. This is a prayer to Adonai, and he has a section where you insert the angel's name, right? He then has you use the asperger and the salt. For the asperger, the water, you recite Psalm 99, and you use that to cleanse the temple space around you, to cleanse your altar, to cleanse the talisman itself. You then consecrate with salt, using Psalm 103. So you see there the altar's a little salty. Probably got a little carried away with this one. And then what I would do with this is where I'm going to divert and show you something kind of crazy. I would draw circles and use an astrological clock. So the outer section here has 12 triangles. You see that? Those are your 12 zodiacal signs. And then you have a Pentagrammaton, because it's always a 5-lettered angelic name, in which you'd have the name of the angel. Right? So there's your angel name right there. Actually, I think that is this one that I'm holding right now, isn't it? Let's see. Yeah. Cool. Yechavia. So, Yechavia. And then I would draw in whatever the zodiacal sign we're pulling at, and what I would do here is this is where I'd throw in some Golden Dawn stuff. I would try to do a mental, either rising in the planes, where you start to visualize that sphere of the tree of life in the appropriate spot, and you do essential rising in the planes meditation to reach up into that Sephiroth. Once you're there, you can visualize that sphere all around you, right, in the colors. So in this case, it would be the Sephiroth that is gray flecked with pink, right? And that's really why I created these, so you can memorize what all these things look like. Gray flecked with pink, that's going to be right here, okay? And you can vibrate the name Elohim, a tribute to that sphere. Then while visualizing the proper hierarchy, you'd invoke the force, you invoke the zodiacal sign, invoke the planet into it, and then call forth the angel. You could also invoke outside as an outer alembic the zodiac, and then in the center of the alembic, the planet itself. In this case, this is a Mars spirit. See how there's the red, right? Red for Mars, purple for Capricorn, or dark purple for Capricorn. And you call forth that planet within the alembic. So that's just a really visceral way to work that. And as a Golden Dawner, it really makes you pregnant with its force. And I'm aware you're probably talking about how it's spelled clockwise instead of counterclockwise, because that's what Ambelain did, and I was a fledgling magician back then. Didn't realize that was probably not the right way to do this. And then he has an angelic conjuration, a nice big long conjuration, because these guys like to be wordy, in which you insert the name of that spirit. Right? Then you sit and what I would do is bring it all together. We call you forth. You would give the names of that angel, its attributions. So, for example, for this one, we call the Yakavia, 33rd angel, the Shem ha-Mephorash, whose titles include the all-knowing God, the omniscient God, the knower of all things, angel by day of the Three of Discs, ruler of the second decanate and third quintice of Capricorn. I really should have used today's angel. And the Lord of material works, who reveals traitors and destroys their projects and machinations. Ye who reveals the dark side within and gives strength to overcome the negative impulses from within. He who protects all just rulers and keeps their subjects in obeisance. So there's a lot of things that might pull up some things and you have to deal with, but that's where the theurgy comes in, right? Manifest unto us in thy capacity as Deus omnium congenitor, for our assistance in the great work. Then I would call forth the Psalms. I'd use English, so I actually know what I'm saying, Latin, and Hebrew. So you're hitting all three of those branches, right? Then call forth the name itself, make your magical intention, and meditate with that spirit. Or if you had something specifically you're trying to make happen, contemplate that. Or if you have access to the ZAM document by Greatly Honored for our Subspe, contemplate what that Sephiroth, the Tree of Life and Foreworld means. So that's a highly complex way of doing it, but a lot of fun. What Ambelain did is he would just have you, he wouldn't have you do all this extra stuff. He would just, you've got this simple opening, water, salt, prayer, invoke it, contemplate the seal, right? And in those, you're using a simple seal like this, red on virgin parchment. So that is the complex 72-fold name of the Shem ha-Mephorash. It is definitely a form of advanced magic when you use it as in depth as we just did it. But obviously you can approach this in very simple perspectives. You can approach it with just the names. You can approach it with just the Psalms. You don't have to do all those other things. Those are for the people who really want to, go to next level with it. One thing I wanted to present next is a different way that a different kind of Shem has been used. So this Shem comes from Ambelain's reconstructed Shem, and it's actually two different operations. He calls it the operation of the Shem ha-Mephorash and the ritual of the 22 divine names. We in the OMS have brought them together as one operation to work in tandem. And this is going to give you an example of how simple you can approach the Shem without 10 years of Kabbalah behind you, without all this astrological knowledge. Because if all that stuff doesn't mean anything to you, it doesn't mean anything, right? It's impractical. It would be better to approach it in a more simple way. So, this text is sourced from La Kabbale Pratique by Sar Orifer, Robert Ambelain, and it's sourced from the curriculum of a couple different Martinist orders. And we tried to bring together the things that each one of them was missing and then make the instructions clear like we do with all of our stuff. The OMS members are currently all working through this. This is reserved in most reconstructed Elocoan orders for the 7th degree Master Elocoan, but we give it to our first degrees because our first degrees are basically doing 7th degree level work because we've done something completely different with our system. They're about to finish this up. They have about 3 more days left. 3-4 more days. And at which point we may release this document to the public if others want to kind of see how we're innovating things, and if others want to work with it. Not sure if we're going to release it to everyone, not sure if it's going to be just for people in the aspirants group, but we'll see. What we can do is talk about it. So we're going to unite 2 different things here. What he calls the daily invocation of the 22 names of God. And these are all prefixed by Elohim. They're going through the 22 Hebrew letters, Aleph to Tav, over 22 consecutive days. Each of these has a suffix name, a divine name, such as Eye, Bakur, Gadul, Dagul, Hadur, Vesio, Zakai, etc. So Elohim, the first day, Sunday. If we started this on Sunday. Aleph. Elohim Eye. Its divine name in Latin, infinitus. Its divine name in English, the divine essence, or the infinite essence, right? Infinity, etc., etc. So there's these 22 names you're going to work with. The classic circle Ambelain loves to use, the Yeshua circle, Yod He, Vav He, Shin in the center. And there's also an optional secondary circle on the altar, a circle to contain the spirit, to contain your talisman. The word here represents instruction, to learn, to teach. It also has other different meanings if you know how to work your Kabbalah. Here's an example of a talisman, read on virgin parchment. So this is the first one, Eye. Aleph, the first day. Each one has a Ya suffix, so Aleph, Ya. And then Bayet, Gimel, etc., etc. It's a very, very simple talisman, as opposed to these highly complex ones. It gives people a good way to start working with talismans, I think, and start learning how to take that force and projecting energy into a material object, creating a material base for something. That's why I like this very simple 22 divine name system. I should also preface, I didn't say this, all the Shem stuff I talked about is just like a tip of the iceberg. That's eventually going to be a book. It just keeps getting tabled for other projects, but eventually release a complete book on all of that to the public. So here's your altar for the way that we set this one up. Very simple altar. You can use white, you can use red. If you're a Martinist, you want to use one of your grade color cloths, which in the OMS change. And then it's very simple. It's a very simple process. The first day, you consecrate the circle, consecrate the temple, do a long opening in which you do a sensing. You sense the east with Psalm 18 from the Vulgate, or Psalm 19 in the King James. Remember, they're different. Go to the south, you sense with Psalm 10. You go to the west, you sense with Psalm 14. You go to the north, you sense with Psalm 8. Okay? Starting with the Psalms, very classic Cohen way of doing things. That is classical Cohen. Now, I've never seen this in any original Cohen documents. Okay, so people wanted to ask, is the Shem ha-Mephorash used in the original Hello Cohen? I've not seen it used like this. I've not seen it anywhere like that, but definitely those preliminary sensings are. And what's great about what he does here, I'm not sure if he created this or who created this, I don't know, but this is where I was first turned on to it. I'm going to pull up this diagram again for another visual aid. What I think is really brilliant here is that you now invoke in one long prayer, one long psalm, with each of those names put into it. Face east, you invoke the first name. You turn 5 degrees, second name, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and each name is 5 degrees. Each name is a line in that psalm. So after 18, you should be at 90 degrees. So you'd be facing the south. After the next 18, you're facing the west. After the next 18, you're facing the north. After the next 18, you return to the center, to the east. So it's just really interesting way to introduce beginners to the Shem ha-Mephorash without having to do all this complex, crazy stuff where it's like, I don't even know what I'm looking at, right? This gives you a way to start working on invocation, working on prayer in a more simple practice. After that invocation, going 360 degrees, you go into your daily operation. So the first day, Aleph, you invoke this name, Elohim Eye, God of God. You say a simple psalm for it. You say a simple prayer. You consecrate your talisman. You project energy into it. You seal it. You say those names. And you sit there and contemplate and meditate with it. Maybe we're using this as a purely theurgical practice. We're not looking for any thaumaturgic things to occur. We're purely looking for integrating these divine forces, these divine names, in order to raise ourselves, in order to raise our vibration, to temper our limbics, to make us better vessels for the light. And after that first day, you don't have to consecrate every day like that. All you do is every day you go in there, you enter your meditative state, you work this daily psalm, the Shem ha-Mephorash, doing your 360-degree circle, then you do the next day. Do your next day. You do your psalm, you do your next day. You do your psalm, you do your next day as you keep going through each one of these. And at the very end, on the 22nd day, you bring it all together, you do the opening again, you seal it up. And now you have these 22 divine names, which you can tap in with. And maybe as you explore your future magical psalm work, maybe you find new ways to work these. So, whereas what we were showing was a highly complex system of Hermetic Kabbalistic, Judeo-Kabbalistic, Astrological, Tarot, Tree Life and Four Worlds, this is stripped down to just the name, a virtue, and a psalm. Back to maybe a more kosher practice like that. So we're having all of our students do this right now. We might reveal this to the public soon if it feels right. We felt like this was a great practice for the time before the Ascension, after Easter, when the Spirit of the Christ, the Word made flesh, rises from the tomb, and the disciples now are learning directly from the Spirit. We thought, what better way than to have our students learn from the Spirit, to call forth these 22 divine names and these 72 Shem names. And even though they might not be super familiar with them at first, it's a great way to introduce yourself to these divine forces. I would like to follow this up someday once we finish the Shem ha-Mephorash book, Liber Shem. And the goal is to bring together every source, every major source in the Shem, and to make sense of all of them, and to unify all of them into several different ways of working them. So maybe I'll get the motivation one day to finish that. But you know me, I'm always working on like 10 projects at once. That's really all I've got for y'all right now. Unless there are questions, comments, or anything else that I would like to talk about. We'll keep doing these mostly every Friday night, unless I'm out of town for something else, and we'll keep doing Mass every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. CDT, again, unless I have something else planned. So keep coming back. It works if you work it. Thank you all very much for being here.